So Miss Elliott just emailed me and asked me to make a quick video about my Dodge Game program. I know she already did kind of the beginning chunk of it, talking about what each of these three classes are, like kind of initiating the green ball, which is the base, the red ball, which is the enemy, and your player, which is you. But I was going to talk about Dodge Game because that's kind of where the majority of the program goes on. So just kind of quick little overview of how it all works. So there was some stuff in my driver Miss Elliott talked about, but the majority of it she did not, which is what I'm going to do. So right here, this for loop up here, right, that is using a list to create the number of red balls that you're going to see. Because since we're not using array list, we play to a set end score, right? If you play to 10 points, you put in 10 as your argument, that's it. And so what this does is it creates a list, a number of red balls, a list of red balls that is the same length as your argument, right? So if you wanted to play to 10 points, you could have up to 10 of the red balls because for every point, you add another red ball. And the reason I used a list is because I was having trouble kind of adding, I couldn't figure out how to add another ball every time that I would score a point. So I just used a list, and then all that I do is I only print a certain number and move a certain number of the list at a time. So then every time you score a point, the next spot in the list becomes visible and it moves, right? So in here, this is just like a little welcome screen, doesn't matter. And then I use these variables right here. Game on, Miss Elliott talked about. And then I have collision counter, which checks the number of times that I have collided with the green square. Points counter keeps track of my points. And max points is that argument n, or integer n, which I set up here, right? And all that does is it sets the kind of upper limit for how many points you can score. So I initiate them all here, then it's within this game on loop, means it's playing, right? Draw everything out. But you can see I don't start with drawing any of the red balls because it comes from the list and it has to do with this collision counter, is how many of the balls are visible. So the first thing I do before I draw anything is move, right? So we have I and j, both less than n, okay? If I does not equal j, the first thing we do is we check for a player to the green ball collision. Okay, so it's these three variables. This is just like the distance between them, diameter, the same calculations we've done for everything. So that's not really that bad. And then we have this scoring distance. I just set 0.02 as the distance. The one thing that's annoying is for both scoring distance here, where it's 0.02, and later over here, I use it for the red balls. But if it's since the actual red balls have a varied size, if it's a small ball, sometimes it'll look like they collided, but didn't get close enough to that center point. So I'll think I have collided, but it won't actually end the game, which it just is kind of the problem with the distance. But so then within this loop, right, I have my points counter. This loop will happen if scoring distance is less than 0.02. So if I've touched the green square with my player, right? So points counter will go up. It'll randomly move the green square. And then it also will change the velocity in both directions of the player ball. Or sorry, this balls right here is the red balls that will be used as like the enemy ones. So what that says is when we score, they start to move in a new random direction. It doesn't just follow the same path. It makes it a little harder. So then this right here, it's just pretty self-explanatory. If your points counter is equal to max points, you would have won, so game on ends, right? This is player to the red ball collision, all this stuff here. So what that is it's the same calculation as before, right? Just determines the distance between the two, like we've always done. And then it also checks for, so if the distance is close, and then also if I is less than collision counter. And the reason you use that is because it has to do with the number we use collision counter to see how many of the balls are active, right? So technically, when we have this little gameplay going on in this corner, if we set 10 as our upper limit, there will be 10 red balls on the screen, but only, let's say I've only scored 1 point, right? Only 2 of them will be visible and moving. So the reason I use this collision counter is because I check for the index. So if I was moving my guy around, right, and it bumps into one of the red balls that isn't yet visible, it won't end the game there. That's what I use this collision counter for, is to make sure that only the red balls that are actively moving can end the game if I collide with them. So then that's what that's for. Same thing. So if I get hit by the red ball and it's one of the active ones, game on will end, right? This loop down here, what this checks is it initiates the balls that are visible and moving, right? So here, balls I dot move balls J, right? So whatever index is, if I've scored 4 points, there should be 4 balls moving around, and it just runs through the ball list and moves all of them. And then, so that's kind of that. Then we set X, so it just follows your mouse. That's your player. And then we draw the N balls right here. So we clear the screen, and then we draw them, right? Because technically we redraw every time. So all we do is we go from 0 to N, and if I minus 1 is less than collision counter, you're just going to draw that number of balls, right? So if I have, let's say I've scored a point, say I have 6 points. There should be 6 balls, right? Because we're going to just check through here. If it's less than collision counter, which it should be, I minus 1 should be less than collision counter, right? You're then going to draw the balls and move them, okay? And it just keeps drawing the green square and the balls as well. It's a little confusing to explain, but it makes sense when they're moving. I'll show you at the end. And then this part right here, this is just like keeping score on the bottom. And then we have these last 2 little loops. This is just win and loss messages, right? Not that important. If you've hit your upper limit of points, you've won. If you got hit by one of the balls before, you lost. Okay, so the next thing I'll show you is the actual game. And just the one thing that's important to remember is sometimes it'll look like I got hit, but it's because the distance measures to the center point. So if that distance isn't actually close enough, even though it looks like it, the game won't end. But I don't really know how to get around that. So we'll just set 5 as the upper limit. So the welcome screen, press start to begin. It's moving really slow. See, it kind of hit one of its other red balls, which happens every once in a while, but then they both kind of, this red ball that it hit, which we can't see, that's why it bounced back there, it moves. So that was like my kind of way of getting around that, right? So it's moving towards me. I'm going to hit this green one. It moves. Another ball initiates. And you can see every time I hit the green thing, the velocity of the red balls, it changes direction or changes speed. It just becomes random. It's also important that like the red balls don't matter if they touch the green one. Touch it again, right? New one adds. They all kind of bounce around, start moving, all that. Down in the bottom, we have our little score, right? All that stuff. So if I come up, hit it again, and should finish at 5, right? Stops, we've won, okay? That's it. And then I'll just show once more in a loss. So same thing. Ball's moving, right? I get hit. It'll just end it. So that's that same issue of like, I don't really know why it happens, but it's so random where it kind of just won't notice it sometimes, but then randomly another time it does. And I just assume it has to do with the distance being either too big or too small, but I couldn't ever seem to get around that. But it's a little strange. All right, so I think that's just about it, right? So loop to check for green ball collision, check for red ball collision. Draw only a certain number of them at a time, so they're all there. They're all in this screen. Just only a certain number are active and moving. And then, yeah, I think that should be it. A little win and loss screen, and just using these 4 variables to kind of check for everything. All right, thanks, guys.